My name is Tim Colley. I'm the Deputy Director of the Overseas Territories Directorate in London, and I'm very happy to be in BVI for a few days to follow up on the discussions that your Premier had with Henry Bellingham and the leaders of the other overseas territories at the end of last month. One of the things that was under discussion was the new strategy for the overseas territories, where the UK government really wants to have much greater engagement with the territories, and there are three particular ways in which we would like to take this forward. First, a practical agenda of interaction and links between public authorities in the UK and in the territories. Second, working together on the broad good governance agenda, including public financial management and economic planning. And third, working to ensure that the territories have the support they need, including leveraging support from the EU and the Commonwealth. And what I'm very keen to do during this visit is to add some substance to that framework by finding practical areas where there can be cooperation between the UK and BVI. And I'm keen to hear about the areas that you believe that there can be more interaction, and to encourage people to send their views to us through the website, the Governor's website, which has a link to the questions that we've asked, and to encourage people to go onto that and to send us their views and suggestions, because we're really keen that the agenda should be one which is shaped by the views of the people here.
During the visit, you would have met with the Premier.
I had a meeting with the Premier this morning, and we had an initial discussion of some of the areas where we can do this. I know the Premier is keen for us to find ways to work together on, for example, education, but also to work to help the development of the public sector here.
During your talks with the Premier, you made mention about public financial management and economic planning. What were your suggestions to him where these two areas are concerned, or what he suggested to you?
Well, I think that all ministers across the globe are worried about public financial management at the moment. In the UK, we face a very serious challenge in terms of adapting to the new global economic situation, and that requires us to make some difficult and painful reductions in public expenditure and some cuts to the numbers of people who are being employed by the government, in order that we can stimulate and make room for the private sector to grow. And I think these are challenges that all governments face, that if we want to have a vibrant private sector economy, we need to make sure that we control public sector costs, and we need to have a public sector that the banks and everybody believes is on a firm and secure footing.
As regards economic planning, you would have heard the recent address to the nation by the Premier as regards the economic situation, the financial situation of the BVI is grim. You would have also heard when he came back from the London talks that things were looking so good as regards the financial situation of the territory. You were asking the media early on about what people want to find out. It's a scary situation whereby we are hearing these things about the BVI, and what is being done by the UK government as regards with the Turks and Caicos Islands and laying off civil servants, where several persons have been laid off in the civil service. As regards the BVI, we are thinking about it. Should there's a situation where the UK government will be probably discussing with the BVI, where to control its economic planning in terms of good governance, right? You think this is an area, a road where the BVI is likely to go down?
I think Turks and Caicos and BVI are very different. I have just come from Turks and Caicos, and you are right. The government there is putting in place some quite difficult reforms. There are some big increases in taxation and some cuts in the numbers of people working in the public sector. I think a 25% cut over the next year or so. Now, that seems difficult, but it's necessary in order to bring public expenditure back under control. The situation in Turks and Caicos had become unsustainable under the previous political government. Public expenditure had gone up 3 times. The numbers of people employed in the public sector had increased dramatically. The economy was not a sustainable one. If you have an economy which is based on just selling Crown land, without there being real economic activity, at some point that comes to an end, and that came to a crunch, and we are now having to put government finances on a proper and sustainable basis. That's difficult, but absolutely necessary. And what we're seeing now is tourist numbers are up in Turks and Caicos. The private sector is becoming more confident and beginning to invest in new resorts. So we're feeling optimistic and confident that we are getting the country on the right road, and that we will meet the milestones that will need to lead to a return to democratic government.
Could I follow up on that? You said the situation is different compared to Turks and Caicos. You outlined the Turks and Caicos situation. What is the situation here in the BVI that makes it different?
I think it's a very different situation. I think you have a premier who has said himself that his programme is to put the public finances on the right foot here. So it is a government which is taking that responsibility very seriously, and we want to work in partnership to support that process. There are a lot of things which UK government departments are doing, which are perhaps quite technical things to do with how do you procure public services, how do you ensure that the standard of road maintenance is done properly, how do you ensure that your healthcare system provides the right balance between cost and providing people with the healthcare that they need. And we want to make sure that some of that technical expertise is available to the territories in the areas that you want it and you need. And so we want to work in partnership with this government to help them deliver that important agenda to keep the economy here growing.
A year ago, Colin Roberts was here, and he described the territory's finances as, he said, there were red lights flashing. A couple of months ago, I believe it was in April, he said that the situation had been improved and there were no longer red lights flashing. A week ago, the Premier said that the financial situation was grim. How does the UK define the financial situation of the BVI right now? Do you agree with Premier Smith's view?
I think there are often two sides to the coin, and I think if you look at the global economy, then it is a very challenging situation. And if you look at parts of the local economy, you can see some areas which are positive. So I think there is some truth in a picture which is quite mixed, that there are some areas where the economy is positive and some areas where there is concern. But I think the countries and the territories which will do best in this period of economic turmoil are those that act quickly to ensure that they have robust public finances and they can weather the storm that is out there.
In the in the 6 Caribbean overseas territories, several of them are having financial troubles right now. Several of them have reached the borrowing guidelines. Given the financial situation in England in the United Kingdom, with the austerity measures, what model can the UK provide for finances in light of financial management, in light of what's happened?
I think that it's a mistake to see the UK as the banker to the overseas territories. I think the role that we can best play is to support each individual territory have credibility in the marketplace. And we were very pleased that we were able to sign an agreement with the Premier of the Cayman Islands about responsible public financial management, because we think that that helps his credibility in the marketplace. It provides reassurance to investors, and that's the kind of practical advice that and support that the UK government can provide.
But given the UK's own financial situation, do you feel that the government there has the credibility to give that advice?
I think the UK government is doing the right thing to ensure financial stability in the UK. And if you look at what has happened to the pound, for example, that suggests that the market has confidence in the UK government's programme.
I just want to ask a question regarding French and Platinum News. You said earlier that the Turks and Caicos Islands, you've seen signs where public spending has gone up, and so changes are necessary. I think the Premier a few days ago alluded to some of those ballooning spending that's gone on in the BVI. Do you think that we need to make a change in the BVI in the way public spending is occurring, or has occurred?
I'm not an expert on BVI's public finances, so I don't want to get into the detail. And I think you have a situation now that you have a premier, a new government who is taking stock of the situation here, and who I think has, in the launch of the government's programme yesterday, said all the right things about tackling issues. The challenges are all in the future, are about how to implement that programme, and that's the sort of issue on which we would like to continue to work in partnership with the government.
You made mention, sir, that there is a premier in place now who would like to take stock of the situation. Stock of what situation, sir?
I think any new government coming in wants to look very carefully at public finances. I think every government, in my experience, comes in and finds that public finances are more challenging than they had realised. And as we move from a pre-election to post-election phase here, it's important for the government to focus very clearly on what its priorities are and to ensure that those priorities are driven forward very strongly.
So the stock of the situation you're talking about is the financial management, having proper financial management.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you agree that there were not proper financial management, are you good then? Saying that this is the stock of the situation you're talking about?
I wasn't trying to say that. I wasn't trying to make a judgment. But a number of people have told me that that there are areas where the government could improve the way it manages public money. For example, to ensure that procurement always gets the best value for money for the people of the islands, and that's the sort of area where we would like to support the government to deliver what they say.
So, were you involved in discussions in London with the Premier?
Yes.
Do you, after listening to what the Premier said, you got the situation or the idea that there's a grim situation, the situation in financial services or the finances or the BVI were grim? You got that from him? You had that feeling after the discussions?
I think that there are real challenges in the financial services situation in the globe. BVI now has to compete in a global marketplace against Hong Kong and Singapore, as well as against Cayman and Jersey. And I think it's very important that you invest in your young people, in education, and in developing people who can support that industry for the future. And yes, it is challenging.
But despite all of that,
Come on, give somebody else a chance. You better get a more question.
Sorry for this last. Despite all of that, you say about the financial situation, the global situation. Did you get the feeling from what the Premier said that there was a grim situation here, where the management finances is concerned? Did you get that feeling?
I think we are optimistic about the future, despite the challenges that exist.
I just want to ask, you mentioned you heard yesterday some of the plans the government has. Then would you say that the government is on the right track, based on what you heard?
I think based on what the government has said, I've been impressed by the ambition of the government's agenda. I think there are a number of areas where it's very positive that they've included some very significant reforms, and I'm keen to support that work.
Sorry, one question. You use the word partnership consistently. How flexible do you intend to be in this relationship? I know that in some territories, as Dan pointed out, whether a government sees the right place to cut back to be Area B or Area C or Area D. In the talks in Caicos, we talked about cutbacks in the civil service. I know that's something that agitates people. How flexible do you intend to be if the government comes up with its own idea for how those cuts are going to make it? Is this something you support, or you basically look at it and you make an assessment of this won't do, this is the way we think you should go, and that's how it will look?
Yeah, I think it's very much for the democratically elected governments of the territories to decide their own priorities for public expenditure. I think where we can help is to ensure that the overall framework for public expenditure is a sustainable one, and that the systems that are put in place to ensure that framework works are robust. And every government wants to ensure that the money that it's collecting is spent on the things that it thinks are most important. But in practice that can be quite difficult, and it needs proper good systems to authorise expenditure, to check expenditure has been spent properly. And it's those sort of systems that I think we can really support the territories to put in place, so that the government here can deliver on the things that they're promising.
While acknowledging and keeping in mind, of course, that the final decisions as it relates to spending will rest with, as you put it, the democratically elected government, do you foresee the UK perhaps voicing stronger opinions and suggestions and guidelines, so to put it, as to not, I wouldn't say oversight, but more guidance to certain government spending than before, than previously?
I think the UK government is determined to avoid the sort of situation that we found in Turks and Caicos. I think we found it very difficult to see how deep the problems were, and therefore it is really a really positive thing to have increased transparency between the UK and the territories, so that we are aware what the financial situation is and where the problems might be, so that we can support earlier action and avoid the sort of situation in Turks and Caicos, which is not a situation that we want to continue, and we want to get back to a democratically elected government and as soon as practical.
Quite so, sorry, but should that be construed as a yes? Will you be voicing stronger opinions? Because of course the reception that the UK government got when it was perceived that it stepped in and took over.
Yeah.
Will the government now be trying to avoid that perception by giving stronger recommendations, more oversight before it gets to that level?
It's a good journalist question, and I think the answer is that it depends very much on how well governed the territories are. If there is nothing for us to say, then we don't need to say it. But if there are problems, we will have a good, frank dialogue with the governments of the territories if we need to have that. But our hope is that by having much closer contact, we can. It can genuinely feel much more like a partnership, because if we work together and we think together, then we don't end up at opposite ends of an argument, and that's so it is very much that sort of practical partnership that we're looking for.
One question: with all overseas territories, you carrying out this type of arrangement, is it dependent on the financial position of the country? I know there's been some discussion over some countries have different guidelines and different measures that went in place, specifically like Cayman Islands, and where their budget is required.
Yeah.
Is it dependent on the financial position of the territory you're doing that, or you're doing it blanket to all territories?
I mean, the territories are, as I'm discovering, remarkably diverse in size and economy and their position in the globe. And we have, each has its own legal framework, and we don't want to have a one-size-fits-all policy. So we're not trying to say that every territory must have exactly the same laws and the same arrangements. But we are saying that there is a need for all of the territories to have credible public finances, because the global financial situation is putting more pressure on governments to put their own house in order. And you have seen what has happened in Greece and in Europe, that governments have been taken by surprise by the markets. And so what we're trying to make sure is that all the territories have sound public financial management, and we don't see those sort of problems here or in any other territory.
What is your approach to analysis? Government submits, their overall restructuring, policy or their budgetary vision, and you look at that and you decide whether this looks like it will work, or it looks like it won't work. What's your analysis? How is your analysis now?
I hope that one of the things that will happen is that we will continue to have a good exchange of information with the authorities in the British Virgin Islands, because my colleagues who are economic experts have been looking at the situation here for over the years, and what we're doing is trying to not invent something new, but to make a process which has already started a more effective one.
Could I just suggest, we've had quite a lot on public finance. Could we talk a bit about the white paper, perhaps? I know there were questions earlier on about that. Would you like
I've run out on public finance.
You're going over the same ground again, I think. So could maybe someone like to ask a question about the consultation process or the white paper?
Could you give us a time frame for the white paper? When are these consultations going to finish up, and what's the process moving forward?
Thank you. Let me say a little bit about the white paper, because I think a lot of people in the UK and in the territories don't immediately understand what a white paper is. In this case, the UK government wants to capture what its vision is for the territories. We last had a white paper back in 1999, which was produced by the previous UK government. The current government sees itself as having a distinctive policy that is strongly committed to the security of the territories, which is strongly committed to providing financial support for the poorest territories that need it. So the UK government's providing significant support in Montserrat, has just announced £240 million worth of investment in a new airport for St Helena, and a process of re-engagement with the territories. And we see the white paper as a way of communicating to the UK government machinery the importance of working with the overseas territories and communicating to people here. It's not the end of the process. It will be, the strategy will continue, and we want to complete our initial phase of consultation through the website and through information from territory governments at the end of December. But after that, we won't have stopped listening. There will be a continuous dialogue and a continuous quest to find new opportunities to implement the strategy. I'd like just to commend in particular the new partnership between BVI and Hertford County Council in the UK, which started off as a way of working together on training for the Olympics and has developed into a broader partnership. And I think is a very good example of the sort of partnerships that we're hoping to build with all the overseas territories.
But as far as a timeline for the eventual white paper to be published, is there a date in mind?
There is a commitment to publish the white paper early next year.
Are the borrowing guidelines part of that paper, or is that a separate negotiation process?
Our intention is to update the borrowing guidelines and to have a slightly broader framework with those territories, which captures the sort of financial management issues that we were talking about a few minutes ago.
On the topic of the borrowing guidelines,
Back to public finance again.
That's the biggest job now.
sorry, just one question.
But let me ask one more paper on the white paper just before we go back.
Okay.
Let's have another couple of questions about it.
Obviously, the discussions about the white paper and the request for the public to be involved came at a poor time for us in the territory elections.
Yeah.
I know that there are a number of people who have an opinion on what this engagement should look like. Do you intend to have an extended period of time, or seek to have some kind of public discussions where this can happen in the territory, seeing as how we weren't able to do it within the time frame?
I'm very sorry that the consultation process, the consultation timeline coincided with the elections here, and that some people felt that that meant it was difficult for them to focus on both things at the same time. The consultation process, the website is open till the end of December, and we encourage people to send us their views now. Perhaps it's a good moment if you have a quiet time over the in the run-up to Christmas to log on to the website and to add your views. There have been some interesting debates and discussions on everything from public financial management to questions of belongership and immigration and threats of illegal immigration. So there's been a whole range of issues that have been raised, and I think it's been a very helpful discussion, and we encourage people to that debate.
Are you satisfied only with the people logging onto the website, or are you going to arrange public meetings and other media discussions around the white paper relationship, and what kind of time frame do you think that will happen?
I think here we are engaging with the government, and we know that the government have been conducting some work to be able to feed in views to us which represent the views of some of the stakeholders here. I'm not planning to go around and to have direct sort of town hall meetings because I'm not a BVI politician, and I probably wouldn't make a very good BVI politician, and I know that there are people here who can do that communication much better, and I'll be looking forward to them contributing. But we are very open. It doesn't have to be through the website. We're very open to having information sent to us in any form, and the website enables you to make your comments public. It also enables you to send your comments to us in private. So both are possible.
Let me just go back to this one thing before, because I feel the governor may end the press conference before I get this question.
I wouldn't do it.
The area of bad, you said you were involved with the discussions in London with the local delegation, right?
Yeah.
And we were told on the return of the delegation about the bad financial management of the previous administration. To come to a conclusion of bad financial management, the areas of bad financial management must be identified before you say there's bad financial management. What we are trying to get in the last press conference and following the discussions there, and now, what areas were there in the bad financial management? In what areas? Was it in the capital projects, or was it in the recurrent? Because if we could conclude bad financial management, there must be areas identified. What are these areas, or where are these areas identified where there was bad financial management?
I think it's a question for the BVI government to identify the areas of financial management that they want to improve here, and to set out where they think the financial management by the previous administration was not satisfactory. It's not an issue for me.
Can I just ask a question on a completely different topic? There seems to be some issues with the capabilities of our policemen and women. How do you see the UK working along with the BVI in terms of enhancing the skills and the capabilities of our policemen and women?
Thank you. I had a meeting with the Deputy Police Commissioner this morning, and we discussed the range of areas where the UK is working with the BVI police, including a number of former UK policemen who are working here, and how that can provide the police both with capacity to take forward specialist investigations and difficult murder investigations, and can also help colleagues here gain skills. Now, I think there is you are blessed with not having the numbers of serious crimes that some police forces have to deal with, and I think that means that it is useful for police officers here to get experience in other jurisdictions where there are more of those sort of challenging cases, be it in Jamaica or the States or the UK. So I think those are the sort of areas that we can help and support.
Can I just add on that? I mean, there's quite a lot of scope for training from the UK, and that can take various forms. You've probably read recently that there's been training conducted at the Levitystock Community College of officers here in the RBIPF. That's been conducted by a UK trainer, who spent a number of weeks here trying to upskill constables and sergeants. We've also had BVI policemen travelling to the UK to attend courses, and in some cases staying on after that course and being embedded in a UK police force for practical experience of how it works on the ground. We have had and will have in the future senior BVI police officers going to major courses in the UK, strategic command courses in the UK to upskill themselves for senior leadership and so on. We've had training done by British trainers for the Marine Police and other marine law enforcement units, both for the BVI and right across the overseas territories, and that training has been carried out at the Marine Centre at the Liberty Star Community College. Tim Colley,
which I went to visit this morning and saw the facilities.
There are many ways in which we can exchange experience, and where the BVI can learn from some of the challenges that we face in the UK. Another area, for example, domestic violence. Was a BVI policeman and woman, I think, went back to the UK recently and did some work there, and again embedded themselves for a period in a UK police force to find out how we were handling some of these tricky issues. So I think it's an excellent area where we can work together. Another is, for example, prisons. There's a lot of exchange also on the prison front. We've had UK trainers out here developing courses for the prison officers up at Balsam Gut, and there's quite a lot of opportunity there for exchange between overseas territories. Tim Colley mentioned that we're also looking to try and enhance arrangement under which overseas territories can learn from each other. And we've recently been looking at Cayman Islands, where they introduced electronic tagging of prisoners, and we're actually doing a pilot of electronic tagging here in the BVI at the moment, using equipment which was used in Cayman before, and we're piggybacking on what they've learnt in Cayman and hope to apply that here in the BVI. So that's exactly the sort of areas where the new government wants to look for further opportunities for collaboration, for exchange, for attachment, for secondment, any way in which we can help build the capacity here of the BVI to develop its own strengths and skills.
Apart from the security issues, what other areas of cooperation were discussed in your time here, meeting with the Premier?
Can I broaden that a little bit, because when the Premier was in the UK for the meeting with other Premiers and UK Ministers, there were 10 different UK Ministers who came along to the meetings over the course of 2 days to talk about a whole range of issues, including education, the security area, economic and financial areas, areas to do with transport and transport safety, areas to do with health and education and pensions. So a lot of different issues, and I think we are willing and ready to work with the territories on items within the compass of all those areas, but we are looking to the territories to set out clearly what you think would be most useful.
Can I just give you one example which the Premier mentioned? As Tim said, the UK government departments each sent a minister along to the Overseas Territories Consultative Council, so there were 10 different government ministers present, not just the Foreign Office as would have been the case in the past. So we had ministers from each of those departments present. One of the ministers was from our Department of Education, who talked about specific areas in which the Department of Education might be able to provide help, support and capacity building for the BVI. One specific area mentioned was special needs training, and I know that BVI, this government has identified special needs training as an area where capacity needs to be built, and there may well be scope for assistance to be provided from the UK, where perhaps trainers could go across to the UK to see what we're doing and bring that back to the BVI and spread that good practice. So that's just one concrete example of where there may be benefit from collaboration. It doesn't mean that the UK has to take its hand in its pocket to spend huge amounts of money. It's a practical way in which assistance and support can be provided, which is actually mutually beneficial.
Back to the topic of law enforcement. There's been a lot of training. There have been, of course, the UK officers coming over and embedding themselves and imparting their experience. What about equipment? A hot button topic locally has been the discussion about arming police officers versus not, which is a UK tradition of not lethal force.
Yes.
What about non-lethal force alternatives? It was announced in the previous administration that the possibility of some non-lethal alternatives were being looked at. What do you see the UK's role being in assisting with equipment-wise?
I know that the police have talked about possible use of non-lethal equipment, for example tasers, and some of the UK forces have experience of tasers, and there are policy guidelines which have been developed in the UK for use of tasers, and that again would be a perfect way of transferring experience and skills, where you could have training. We haven't had a request for training yet in the area of tasers, but if there was such a request put in, I'm sure that we would be ready to respond, and we could provide training facilities, or we could also provide our rules of engagement or the codes of practice that have been adopted in the UK for the use of tasers. That would be a very good example of where the BVI doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, where we've done it already in the UK with our own forces, and we could adopt, we could export that policy to the BVI at no cost to the BVI.
I just want to ask a question. I think both administrations, the previous administration and the current government, they both agreed on one aspect of the financial arrangement going forward. Are they not prepared to submit their budgets for pre-approval? Is this something that the UK is stuck on, or is it going to relax this approach in terms of the BVI?
We think that it is something of advantage to both parties to have some transparency about financial planning, because BVI gains some credibility by having exchanged ideas with the UK before making decisions on its future budget. So it's not a question, I think, of us trying to take back power that has been devolved constitutionally to the government here. It is about a pragmatic way of responding to global economic events in a way that gives the government here the maximum opportunity to establish its financial credibility.
Was this decision born out of the lack of transparency or lack of accountability based on the previous government? Was it just something you had to do?
Well, I think that your colleague talked about the borrowing guidelines, which had been put in place, and what we want to do is to modernise that approach and to make it a broader one, rather than to say this is the line in the sand and that you can't go across. To have an open dialogue about financial management issues, so that we don't ever get into a confrontational situation. And I think here the confrontation is not likely between the UK government and the territories. Actually, the constraints that governments face are being set by the financial markets, and what we're trying to do is to enhance the credibility of the territories in those financial markets, so that when the government here wants to borrow to develop and invest in infrastructure, it's able to do so at a more credible rate. It's able to access financing because everybody can see that the public finances are good and sustainable.
But it seems like I made a report yesterday, some other overseas territories in which these policies are being put in place are being challenged. So the territory was saying that they hired their own financial advisors to look at the budgetary stuff that they were submitting, and that the stuff that was said by the UK weren't exactly correct. Some of that stuff is obviously being challenged. In terms of this partnership, how open are you to other alternative measures before? I noticed you avoided the question about whether or not you will be moving forward with having to submit the budget, but that's a question everybody wants to know.
I think I'm sorry, but I think what we're all looking for right here, in regards to that question, is really a yes or no. That is really a yes or no question. Is the UK stuck on this, or are you willing to be flexible in regards to each territory?
I think what I'm not trying to do is to give you a legal answer, because we're not approaching this in a confrontational, legalistic sort of way. We're trying to make this something that all parties want to do because it makes sense for all parties to do it, and I think it's much better to approach it in that sense rather than rather than for it to be portrayed as a yes/no answer. I don't think it's that sort of relationship that we want.
Could I ask one last one?
Okay, and then
there we go. I think I've
this is
answered
the
it.
last. I'm sorry, we've got a fair crack at it.
One last one.
Sure, go on.
You made mention that the different overseas territories have different experiences.
Yeah.
The BVI is different to the Turks and Caicos Islands. Turks and Caicos, we spoke about the public expenditure, getting it back under control.
Yes.
The whole issue with the budget to go to London, is it negotiable? Can the BVI, because in light of the different territories having, in light of the territories having different experiences, in other words, then the BVI may have different experience than the Turks and Caicos because their public expenditure needs to be under control. So, as regards,
Is it negotiable?
is it negotiable as regards the budget being sent to London before it's passed?
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think it's very much in the interests of the BVI government to work openly with the UK government on public financial management and to engage with us at an early stage in financial planning. I think that's in your interests and it's in our interests.
Do you support it?
Obviously, in the Turks and Caicos, the territory was taken over in Cayman Islands. There, it was forced. Is it something that's flexible?
Exactly.
You talk about a partnership.
What would be a worst case scenario? We fully appreciate the need for diplomacy. But
we just want to know whether it's negotiable. Is it something that can be negotiated?
What would be the worst case scenario if the government strictly expresses they do not want to proceed on that?
Because
what would be the worst case scenario?
Because so remember you ask us what we need, what are our problems, what we need to find out.
This is
That is our concern.
The worst case, I'll tell you what the worst case scenario is that we have another Turks and Caicos, and we want to avoid that. So we're trying to set arrangements in place which avoid us going down that route. We don't want to have to intervene in the way we did in Turks and Caicos. We want to get out of the situation in Turks and Caicos as soon as we can, as soon as it's practical to do so. We've set milestones to return to elected government, and we want to avoid, the British ministers have made very clear that they want to avoid another Turks and Caicos happening. That's the worst case scenario. Is that okay?